Imagine that everything you've been taught about life after death is just a fragment of a much deeper knowledge, a piece of truth that has been carefully shaped over time. What if reincarnation, a belief present in multiple cultures and ancient civilizations, was once part of Christian thought, but was deliberately removed? Who removed it? What would it mean for humanity if this truth were restored? Today, we will explore one of the greatest mysteries in religious history, reincarnation and its connection to the Bible. We will reveal how this teaching may have been part of the early Christian texts, who was responsible for its exclusion, and most importantly, what this means for our existence and spiritual evolution. Stay tuned until the end, because the final revelation I'll share with you is the most shocking of all and could change the way you see life, death, and the purpose of our existence. Since ancient times, the idea of reincarnation has been a cornerstone in various philosophies and spiritual tradition. In Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Gnosticism, and in the esoteric teachings of Egypt and Greece, the human soul is seen as an eternal traveler, returning again and again to the material world on its journey toward perfection. But what happened to this belief within the Christian tradition? To answer this question, it is essential to understand how the Bible we know today was formed. We often take for granted that sacred texts have remained unchanged since their origins. But the reality is that they have been the subject of multiple editions, translations, and ecclesiastical decisions, determining what should be included and what should be excluded. And here is where we find one of the greatest enigmas: fragments that hint at reincarnation, teachings that seem to have been suppressed, and the influence of powerful institutions that shaped the Christian doctrine according to their own interests. One of the earliest indications that reincarnation may have been part of Christian teaching comes from the early Gnostic Christians. The Gnostics, who flourished in the early centuries after Christ, believed in the transmigration of the soul and the idea that humans had to purify themselves through multiple lives. Their writings, many of which were discovered in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, contain references to the pre-existence of the soul and its evolution through different incarnations. However, mainstream Christianity took a different direction when the church began to consolidate its power in the 4th century. With the rise of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire under Emperor Constantine, councils were held to define the dogmas of the Christian faith. It was in these councils that crucial decisions were made on which doctrines would be accepted and which would be condemned as heresy. And here arises a troubling question. If reincarnation ever formed part of early Christianity, why was it eliminated? The answer leads us to one of the most influential councils in history, the Second Council of Constantinople, held in the year 553 after Christ. It was at this council where the doctrine of the pre-existence of the soul, defended by the influential theologian Origen of Alexandria, was condemned as heresy. Origen, one of the early church fathers, believed that souls existed before birth and that they went through multiple lives on their way back to God. His teachings on the purification of the soul through various incarnations were fundamental to his thought. However, the church, in its quest for a unified dogma, rejected these ideas and declared that each soul was created at the moment of birth and that it had only one life to achieve salvation. But the key question is, what was the motive behind eliminating reincarnation from Christian doctrine? The answer is deeper than we might imagine. If people believed they had multiple opportunities to evolve and correct their mistakes, would they easily submit to the rules imposed by a religious authority? The idea of a single life and an irrevocable final judgment creates fear, and therefore control. Consider this: a doctrine that teaches that the soul has multiple opportunities to learn and grow is one that empowers the individual. In contrast, a doctrine that imposes the idea of an eternal fate in heaven or hell after just one life grants enormous power to those who claim to hold the key to salvation. Was this the true reason behind the removal of the concept of reincarnation? And if this is true, what other truths have been hidden throughout history? What comes next will surprise you even more. We will discover biblical texts that suggest the existence of reincarnation and analyze how some of the words attributed to Jesus might be interpreted in this light. Throughout history, the Bible has been subjected to numerous interpretations, translations. However, if we look closely, we find passages that could hint at the existence of reincarnation. This belief may have been part of early Christianity before being dismissed by ecclesiastical decision. One of the most intriguing examples is found in the Gospel of John, when the disciples asked Jesus about a man who was born blind. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" John 9:2. This question is profoundly revealing. It implies that the disciples considered the possibility that the man might have sinned before being born, suggesting a prior existence. Why would the disciples think that someone could have sinned before their birth if they hadn't had a previous life? Another intriguing passage is found in Matthew 11:14, when Jesus speaks of John the Baptist and says, "And if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come." Elijah was a prophet from the Old Testament who lived centuries before John the Baptist. So, why would Jesus say that John the Baptist was Elijah who was to come? The traditional interpretation argues that this is a metaphor, but if we look at it from the perspective of reincarnation, it could be understood as confirmation that the soul of Elijah had returned in the form of John the Baptist. Later in Matthew 17:10-13, after the transfiguration, the disciples ask, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus responds, "Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man will suffer at their hand." The account goes on to say that the disciples understood that Jesus was referring to John the Baptist. Again, this perfectly aligns with the idea that John the Baptist was, in a sense, the reincarnation of Elijah. While these passages can be interpreted in various ways, they certainly leave open the possibility that reincarnation was part of the thinking of the time. And this leads us to the big question. If reincarnation was implied in these texts, why was it removed from Christian teaching? To understand this, we must analyze the role of Emperor Justinian and his influence on the early church. In the 6th century, Justinian's wife, Empress Theodora, played a crucial role in the condemnation of the doctrine of the pre-existence of the soul. According to historical records, Theodora was obsessed with the idea that if reincarnation were accepted, her power over the people would diminish. Writings from historians of the time suggest that Theodora used her influence to ensure that the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 condemned the teachings of Origen, who promoted the idea that souls existed before birth and went through multiple incarnations. This condemnation marked a turning point. From that moment on, any teaching related to the pre-existence of the soul and reincarnation was considered heretical. But here arises a fundamental question. If these teachings were eliminated, how can we access the truth? The answer lies in the texts that were excluded from the official biblical canon. One of the most shocking discoveries of the 20th century was the Nag Hammadi Library, a collection of Gnostic texts found in Egypt in 1945. Among them are Gospels that provide a different perspective on Christian spirituality, moving away from the dogma imposed by the Church. In these writings, the idea that souls reincarnate to achieve a state of enlightenment is a recurring theme. The Gospel of Thomas, a text attributed to one of Jesus' closest disciples, contains phrases that suggest a more esoteric view of human existence. One of the most enigmatic passages says, "When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father." Poverty. This type of teaching resonates with the idea that a human being is not simply an entity that lives once and is judged eternally, but is instead in a process of self-discovery and spiritual evolution. But what implications does all this have for us today? If reincarnation was removed from Christian doctrine to exert control over humanity, it means we have been deprived of a fundamental truth about our own existence. Accepting reincarnation would give us a completely different perspective on life, death, and the purpose of our soul. If we knew that our actions affect not just this life, but also our future lives, we would strive harder to grow, learn, and evolve spiritually. And if reincarnation is real, how can we discover who we were in past lives? If reincarnation has been deliberately eliminated from Christianity, we are faced with a shocking revelation. For centuries, a knowledge that could transform our understanding of life and the purpose of our existence has been hidden from us. But if this is true, how can we discover the truth for ourselves? There is evidence of reincarnation beyond sacred texts. To answer this, we must look beyond institutionalized religion and explore other sources of knowledge. Throughout history, various cultures have held the belief in reincarnation, not as a mere myth, but as a fundamental truth about the nature of the soul. From the teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism to the mysteries of ancient Greece and Western esotericism, we find a consistent pattern. The idea that the soul travels through multiple lives in order to learn, evolve, and attain a state of enlightenment. One of the major proponents of this teaching in Greek philosophy was Pythagoras. Best known for his contributions to mathematics, Pythagoras was also a mystic who taught the doctrine of metempsychosis, the cycle of rebirth of the soul. According to his disciples, he himself remembered his past lives and believed that the purpose of existence was to purify the soul until it was liberated from the cycle of reincarnations. Later, during the Renaissance, great thinkers like Giordano Bruno defended the idea of reincarnation, suggesting that the soul is immortal and returns again and again to material existence. It is no coincidence that Bruno, like many others who challenged the dogmas of the Church, was condemned for heresy and burned at the stake. But we don't need to go so far back in history to find evidence supporting reincarnation. In modern times, multiple studies have documented astonishing cases of individuals, especially children, who seem to recall past lives with amazing detail. One of the most recognized researchers in this field was Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist from the University of Virginia, who dedicated decades to studying past life memories in young children. Stevenson gathered thousands of cases of children who, without any logical explanation, could describe places, events, and people from previous lives with incredible accuracy. Some even had birthmarks or scars that matched injuries suffered in their supposed past life. One particularly striking case was that of a boy in India who remembered being a murdered merchant in his past life. He was able to identify his former family, describe his home, and provide details about his death that were verified with historical records. Another notable case is that of James Leininger, an American boy who, from a very young age, had recurring nightmares about a plane crash. Over time, he began to share details about his past life as a fighter pilot during World War II. His family, initially skeptical, investigated his accounts and found that everything he said matched the history of a real pilot who had died in combat. These cases raise unsettling questions. How is it possible for a young child to remember such precise details of a past life? Could it be that reincarnation is not just a philosophical concept, but a reality that has been suppressed from our collective consciousness? And if reincarnation is real, what does that mean for our current life? The answer is profound. It means that each of us has lived before and will live again. It means that every decision we make, every act of love or hate, every lesson and every mistake does not disappear into the void, but accompanies us throughout our multiple existences. If this is true, it also completely changes our conception of death. Death ceases to be an absolute end and becomes a portal to a new experience. But not only that, if we have multiple lives, then our relationships, our talents, and our lessons in this life may have roots in the past. Some people experience an inexplicable connection to certain places, cultures, or people. Have you ever met someone and felt like you'd known them your whole life? Or have you visited an unfamiliar place and felt a strange familiarity? These could be echoes of past lives. Furthermore, there are methods that many people have used to try to recall their past lives. Hypnotic regression is one of the most well-known techniques used by therapists like Brian Weiss, a psychiatrist who became world-renowned for his book, Many Lives. Weiss worked with patients who, under hypnosis, described past life memories with astonishing detail And in many cases, understanding these experiences helped heal traumas and emotional blocks in their present lives. If all of this is possible, it leads us to an even deeper question. Why don't we remember our past lives clearly? Spiritual traditions offer various explanations. Some believe that forgetting is an essential part of the learning process. If we remembered every past experience with total clarity, our minds could be overwhelmed by the weight of multiple existences. Others suggest that forgetting is a mechanism that allows us to focus on the present, on the challenges and opportunities of this life. However, throughout history, certain individuals have managed to access these memories, whether through spiritual practices, dreams, meditations, or even near-death experiences. So, what can we do with this information? How does knowing that reincarnation was removed from the Bible affect us, and why? The answer is transformative. Knowing that we have lived before and that we will live again frees us from the fear of death. It allows us to see life as a continuous growth journey, where every experience has a purpose. And most importantly, it gives us the opportunity to live with greater awareness, knowing that our actions not only affect this life, but also our future incarnations. But there is an even deeper mystery to explore, a hidden knowledge that has been safeguarded by initiates and mystics throughout history. In the last part of this video, we will reveal the most powerful truth of all, a truth that can change how you understand existence itself. Since time immemorial, sages, mystics, and seekers of truth have understood an essential principle. Life is not an isolated event, but a cycle, an eternal journey of the soul through time and space. But there is something even deeper, a knowledge so powerful that it has been suppressed, hidden, and distorted for centuries. If reincarnation is real, then the story of our soul is much more vast than we can imagine. We are not mere ephemeral beings trapped in a predetermined destiny. We are cosmic travelers, engaged in a continuous process of spiritual evolution. And here we encounter the most shocking truth of all. Reincarnation not only explains the past, but also gives us the keys to shape our future. The ancients understood that existence is governed by universal laws, and one of the most fundamental is the law of karma. But karma is not a punishment, as many believe. It is an opportunity. It is the reflection of our actions through time, the echo of our choices manifested in every new life. Every act of kindness, every thought, every emotion is recorded in the essence of our soul and accompanies us in our future incarnations. This is why some people are born with inexplicable talents, with abilities that cannot be justified solely by genetics or education. Prodigious artists, children with extraordinary capabilities, people who possess an intuitive knowledge of disciplines they never studied. All of this could be the continuation of a learning process that began in previous lives. But the opposite also happens. Traumas, irrational fears, unexplainable illnesses. Many of these issues may be linked to unresolved past experiences. That's why the knowledge of reincarnation is not just a philosophical concept. It is a tool for personal transformation. Throughout history, different spiritual traditions have developed methods to access these hidden memories. Tibetan Buddhism, for example, speaks of the practice of bardo, an intermediate state between death and rebirth, where the soul can glimpse its past and its future. The Akashic records, according to esoteric tradition, are a kind of universal library where the history of all souls is written. And as we mentioned before, hypnotic regression has allowed many people to uncover memories of past lives that have changed their self-perception. But there is something more. If everything we do in this life leaves a mark on our soul, then we hold the power to change our destiny. We are not victims of chance, nor are we trapped in a meaningless cycle. We are creators of our own reality. If we made mistakes in the past, in this life we have the chance to correct them. If we have unfinished business, we can close the chapter. If we ever felt something was taken from us, we can reclaim it in a new existence. Reincarnation is not a punishment, but an infinite opportunity for growth and redemption. Imagine, for a moment, what it would mean to live with this certainty. If you knew, with absolute assurance, that every action you take shapes your future, you would change the way you live. You would make better decisions and become more aware of your thoughts, words, and actions, because that is the great revelation. The knowledge of reincarnation makes us responsible for our own destiny. It shows us that we are not puppets in the hands of fate, but architects of our existence. And this leads us to the final question. If people understood that their lives are not limited to a single existence, if they knew they have countless opportunities to evolve, they would continue to be subjected to fear. They would still depend on an external authority to find salvation. By removing reincarnation from the official doctrine, the idea of a definitive final judgment, of eternal punishment with no chance of redemption, and of an immovable paradise or hell was imposed. But the truth is that the evolution of the soul is a dynamic and continuous process. We are not here to be judged by a single life, but to learn, to grow, and to transcend. This knowledge is what the great spiritual masters have secretly passed down through the ages. It is the hidden message in many esoteric traditions, in alchemy, in the initiatory mysteries of ancient civilizations. And today, this truth is coming to light again. So now, after everything we've explored, only one question remains. What will you do with this information? You can ignore it and continue living as if this life were the only one, or you can open your mind and start to see the world through different eyes. You can begin to observe your actions with greater awareness, to recognize the signs of your own past and the events of your present, and to prepare for the future you are building with each thought and each act. Because if reincarnation is real, then this is not the first time you've heard this message, and perhaps in a future life, you will remember it once again. But the real question is, what will you do with this knowledge here and now?